one of my colleagues' side as well.
You do that. You do that.
Yeah, yeah. But I didn't see any agenda for today.
Yeah, we mentioned a poster there. It's usually a poster that's in the meetup.
Okay.
Yeah, so because there's a time crunch with the office, so we just make a poster with all the information at one shot and post it right in there. Yeah. While we're talking, Jakob, let's have an introduction. This is about that. I'm not sure if you've met me before on the meetup, but I am usually who organizes it with my partner, Glenn. We both work at Atea, and we're chief consultants there. We're old timers in Azure and governance and stuff. Yeah. Love Bicep, love governance, love security, cyber security. That's kind of my thing too. Yeah. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. I'm Jacob. I work as a principal in 42. So a small consulting company. We focus on both Azure and platform engineering and security. I work mainly in the 365 sphere, identity and all the on the purview for quite a bit. So I don't work in the governance for Azure and how to handle it, but I work in the data governance and the governance of 365 and information.
You should meet Glenn. Glenn is super passionate about 365. Yeah. I'm like the Azure part of it. He's the 365. He's all about 365 and data and purview and all that stuff. I do Microsoft Purview sometimes, but he does 365 Purview. You could talk to him. He's a lovely guy. And I know about 42. I know about 42. I see updates from 42 a lot on my LinkedIn.
Yeah, yes, we're quite active on the LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Trying to build a name. Yeah.
That really helps. But it's Jakob or Jakob?
Yeah, Jakob.
Jakob, like the Norwegian, yeah?
Yeah, the Norwegian one. Yeah.
Norwegian one, yeah. I thought I heard something else. I had to clarify before. Cool. Yeah. I guess it's just two of us, so I'm not going to wait for anybody any longer. Let me just push through. Right, today is my session. That's kind of why I keep posting about the call, because this is a new user group. Sometimes time doesn't allow to chase people. Yeah, and yeah. Okay, cool.
Guests in the lobby.
Yeah, I am approving them.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen.
I just go off camera.
You do that, yeah, absolutely.
That's serve the family as well.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah, cool. Okay, well, thank you everyone. Whoever is here today, we have two people, and that's all I need. Today is my session. My name is Mohit. I'm a chief consultant at Atea, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Azure policies, not just the basics, but beyond the basics, about how and what we can achieve with policies, and not just define and leave them. There are more ways to do and get around it and all that stuff. We start with a little bit of basics and move around. Again, before I move forward, I posted a link for call for speakers. So in case any of you is interested or any of you knows who is interested in talking to the community, we're more than happy to accommodate them. Yeah. Please do let us know if in case you want to hang out and say something about governance, anything that impacts you or anything that you've worked on. There's a proper channel that is there, so you could just go ahead and submit your paper there and proper details with a picture, and we can always welcome you on the community in whichever next meetup we have. Yeah. Please help us out. We're looking for speakers. Cool. So that was one. I hope you could see my screen. So it's basically Azure policies, which in my personal opinion, in my personal experience, is a very nice way to set up some ground rules to, sort of put down the hammer that something cannot be done and something should not be done. A very good example is locations, right? Europe is a very sensitive zone when it comes to data protection, and it's always advised not to go ahead and cross the boundaries of a country while deploying your services. If in case you have data from customers that resides from the country. Norwegians got their own data centers just because of that, because we have very defined and defined is the word, very defined policies as to what we consider sensitive and how do we want to deal with it. Yeah. And Azure Policy is a very good way of not running around and making sure that you and your enterprise rules are followed from the very fabric, very fiber of Azure. And you do not have to follow up or root out resources that are not doing that. Location is a good example, but we see more of them. Yeah. So that was the introduction, and what exactly could happen, right? What exactly could happen? There are a number of things, a very number of things that could happen in case you do not understand or you do not go ahead and provide your users with proper guidance and proper toolings and proper instructions and proper training of what should be done and how it should be done. It's very common to say that the weakest link in any security breach is a human being. In fact, I would also say that the very weakest link in any reporting chain is also a human being. In fact, from deployments also, that's the reason why CI/CD pipelines and automation is getting so much traction, because we do not want human error there. One of the basic tenets of avoiding human error is to predefine and standardize things to make sure that governance is properly in place. One of the ways to do that is infrastructure as code. We do bicep. We go ahead and create modules. We make sure that things are deployed, named, tagged in a certain way, in a certain routine, through a certain pipelines. Yeah. So infrastructure as code or bicep ensures that. But there are more than one ways to deploy it. And it's possible that a person who has certain rights on a certain resource groups or management groups or subscription might be able to bypass that. Right now, with infrastructure as code under the control with the teams, emphasizes that they follow it. The deployment, we do not have any way to monitor the deployment if the deployment is going to follow the governance. This is where Azure Policies comes in. And in the absence of it, there might be a number of things that can actually go wrong with the deployments, with the infrastructure. If things are not done properly, it might be possible that you have admins, contributors, and owners that basically should not be there. There should only be 2 administrators or 2 owners to a subscription or a management group, but there might be more. And that happens just because somebody created those and left them as it is. Yeah. Multi-factor authentication. A lot of people are not using it because simply they're annoyed by it. Yeah. And it might be possible that your admin might be one of those. There's no way to check all of those again and again because you might have similar permissions. There might be somebody you do not want to go ahead and disturb more often, and still you need to implement these policies. That's a contact-less situation where you want to do this. Guest users are a very big situation in enterprises. We have consultants coming and going, but we always have their accounts for some reason. Accounts that might not even be monitored by us. Yeah, that might not even be maintained by us. It might be possible that we're lending somebody else's tenant's user as a guest user. Their tenant gets breached and the credentials lose their owners. Yeah, they're out in the open. What happens essentially is that after that, the guest account, which was no longer eligible to access your tenant, is still the owner. And because the credentials were lost, now they have access to everything that you have. Pretty dangerous situation. And it's a governance nightmare, cybersecurity nightmare at the same time. There might be unaccounted user account permissions who can give permissions to anybody and everywhere, might lead to lateral movement of people who do not want to be associated or do not want to be discovered during their walkthrough in your environment. Network is a very big problem because most resources are deployed out in the open with open to the internet, right? And most developers are oblivious to it. Every organization now has consultants or administrators dealing with Azure, but the absence of a proper application team might fuel a number of resources that are just plain out in the open. I've encountered these situations countless times where people in developer teams offshore are confident that their infrastructure is secure because they have done something or the other, or maybe they have applied certificates to access certain situations. They have virtual machines that have credentials with multi-factor authentication in Azure AD, but they end up having public IP addresses. That's a very scary situation because if people do not know how to make something secure, that might lead to insecurity inherently in production. It is the responsibility of the organization to educate them, but there's only a limit you could do it. So if something could be done to make sure that the fabric itself stops such attempts from deployment, that would inherently solve the problem of being oblivious about it. Public IPs just in time for management ports on virtual machines is a very big problem, highlighted a lot of times by Defender. And that all is just because a lot of people do not understand how the deployments or how these things work. Why are these things important? Why are NSGs important? Why are public access restrictions important? And even that these problems exist, they are oblivious to it. And that's because there's a huge difference between dev and ops still. Yeah. Encryption is one of those things. Database, everything that is deployed vanilla ends up having less security. Encryption in transition, data encryption in SQL databases, FTTPS. Most developers don't use it. Most developers don't use FTP to transfer their file to web applications and function apps. But it's still there, and it's still on FTP rather than FTPS. TLS, still 1.1. And that's not because they are not doing their job. It's just that they do not know that this has to be done. Educating everyone takes time. So all of these points emphasize there has to be something that could just go into the fabric and prevent whatever execution happens if some things don't match. Log analytics, web application firewall should be there with application gateway, a very common thing. People deploy application gateway, configure it, forget the web application firewall. And that again depends because it works on test, should work on production, should be okay. Hasn't happened anything, so that means nothing would happen eventually. Misguided. Of course, governance is also one of those problems that essentially becomes very big to tackle in the long run, and it's not possible to go back on your steps. Resource tagging, unapproved locations, missing name standards, they're absolutely impossible to change after they're done, especially in production. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy, quite frankly, to follow up and go ahead and make sure that the resources are shifted, created with a new name, have proper tagging involved there. It's basically impossible because then you end up with a situation where you have to make sure that the other one or the developers will not agree to everything. So you have to find a middle way which compromises the whole integrity of the process and leaves loopholes there. Yeah. So that was one thing. But just imagine if any of those things are left unchecked. Yeah. Just imagine what could go wrong. A lot, in my opinion, could go wrong. A lot. And that's why when I talk about infrastructure as code, blueprints that has been highlighted, but I don't think it's that talked about, is a very important tool that Azure introduced. You could have policies, you could have infrastructure as code, you can have governance exercises around it, and blueprints are static. So you could deploy the same thing again and again, and it still ends up with this similar governance infrastructure. Yeah. But if just one of these things I had to pick, I'd pick network. Network is the biggest problem in my opinion. And if something could solve that from the fabric itself, that would be amazing. What exactly is Azure Policies? I'm pretty sure some of you are familiar, but just to take my point home, is a service used to create, assign policy definitions. Policy definitions is basically me saying, I do not want HTTPS to be ignored. And that is translated into a sort of ARM template code and put somewhere in the corner in an engine that executes and evaluates before ARM template deploys anything from Portal, from ARM templates, from Bicep or Terraform. It's something of an engine sitting before. It enforces compliance, plus it could go ahead and scale to a whole bunch of levels. Now in Azure, we have management groups, subscription and resource groups with a hierarchy. We often end up with situation where various teams end up with their own subscriptions. Various management groups are assigned to make sure what kind of traffic or what kind of work would be done there. Those management groups could have their own specific policies assigned to them. And that way you could restrict the rules for them on that management group. That's called flexibility on this. That's incredible because if you define a policy, it doesn't have to be, it can be, but it doesn't have to be for everyone in the enterprise. It can be for a couple of them. And that makes it so much easier because not everybody is deploying SQL databases, not everybody is deploying virtual machines. But in case some situations are more dire than the other, you could focus on them. Ideally, these policies should be enterprise-wide, but there might be situations that maybe I don't understand, maybe I can't think of right now. But there are situations, and that's why you could have this flexibility, and that would work wonders there. Yeah. The one thing that absolutely is a charm in this is that because it works at the very fabric of Azure in the fibers before ARM template, it's all real time. So we'll see in a demo just now that when you deploy policies, the evaluation happens at the very second when you're trying to deploy something, not after, not before, not at any other time, except when it has to deploy some linked resources that hasn't been there and your policy says it has to be there, so it remediates it. That's near real time. Otherwise, everything is just real-time remediation. You can actually work on existing resources also if they do not follow the suit. You can have remediation actions and everything. Azure Policies has, in a very crude sense, two different modes. So you could either append and modify, which basically means if somebody deploys something, you go ahead and check if the evaluation works. If it works, it goes ahead and checks if the payload and everything, the compliance checks, they're in place. If they're not, it goes ahead and creates and updates. Just a second. It creates and updates the request in the light of the policy. What happens is that in case, let's say I'm missing HTTPS, and I put the effect of the policy as modify or remediate, it goes ahead and changes that HTTPS requirement from no to yes. In deny or audit, it's very clear. It's either just documented in form of an audit log, or the resource deployment is specifically denied, which in my personal view and experience is much better than append and modify. Because what exactly happens is that when people deploy, when resources are being deployed by teams, the deployment goes through, but somewhere in the middle, policy intervenes, changes and updates. So the end result is not consistent with the infrastructure as code, which the team might have deployed, right? So what happens in the end is that the infrastructure is giving something else as a record of the code, but what ends up reaching is something else, which creates its own flavor of chaos, if you think about it. Because there is no way to if you do not stop it, there's no way to stop the deployment. It just goes through with a change. That, in my personal view, is not a great way to introduce something which doesn't even leave a trace of introduction. So that's confusion personified, in my personal opinion. There might be uses for it, but I don't find it very friendly to our teams in dev. What I find friendly is deny. If a deployment is submitted, it's denied, a proper message is given, and everybody's happy because people appreciate a clear message and a clear output. And that way, their infrastructure, which might be codified, has its consistency and has its integrity in place. So every time they deploy, it's either an error or deployment. If it's a deployment, that means everything was okay with policy. There was no changes. And that works wonders. But in case it goes ahead and modifies it, that means their infrastructure as code is not consistent with their requirement or the output. And that might lead to a whole bunch of confusion that, quite frankly, is very difficult to remediate sometimes. So it feels easy that you could solve problems for them, but it's easier to let them solve their problems. This should more, in my personal view, be as a guidance. Cool. Well, how does this work? Usually, all these policies, all these rules, they're codified and basically an ARM template situation. They're collected as an initiative. You could actually assign every single policy one by one. That's not recommended because policies, like any other code, have similarity with their peers. So in case you want to categorize them, in case you want to keep similar policies together, that always helps in description, proper governance. It's very important not to fragment these policies because it's very easy to run out. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of policies out there for every kind of resources. And combined, they could be just a big number that might not be easy to comprehend or categorize in mind. So it's easy to categorize them, put them in groups, and those groups are basically called initiatives. So instead of assigning policy to a resource, what I do is I collect them and then assign that initiative to the resource. The resource here could be anything. It could be a resource group, it could be a subscription, it could be one storage account, in fact, or one extension. I don't know. It could be very granular. But the point is, if we're targeting a specific resource, it might be easy to target all the policies and bundle them together and then target it. It's easier to troubleshoot, it's easier to assign, it's easier to govern. Azure policies here, if you see here, that's what I was talking about, that you could have policies at every level. You could have a set of policies at the top level. Let's say we have a policy that says no HTTP allowed, only HTTPS allowed for every service, every storage account. And that could be top level. After that, we could have other services or other tenants that people are using. And for that, we could have different policies. Let's say location. For management group in production, the location is West Europe. For management group in test group, the location can only be North Europe or I don't know, Germany, right? That's the location those resources could use. Production can only be deployed to West Europe because that's sensitive, that's critical, that has data. There could be a number of reasons. But you could enforce all of this together with policies and policies assigned to them, separate management groups. Tenant could be separate and they could work out together on its own. But the cumulative effect would be that the policy assigned at tenant and the policy assigned at various management groups work out together and they're compiled together when the resource is deployed. Because the resource at the end is not management group or subscription, it's the actual working compute that is deployed. the network that is deployed, the storage that is deployed. Yeah, a very good diagram, but let me just show you a policy example that would really, that was a surprise. A policy that is defined for Key Vault. Yeah, and if you see, this is one of those network policies, and it's specifically targeted to Key Vault. That means if we could either keep it in a group that is for Key Vaults or for network security, or maybe an overall goal like Microsoft does it for its secure policies. They give you a big bundle that has categories in it, but that category is already bundled in an initiative for Microsoft Secure, right? This here is a policy defined in an ARM template situation or a JSON file, and this is every policy essentially. We'll see. I'll deploy a couple of policies in bicep format, which will be in JSON. This is YAML. This JSON format could be, this format has a bicep sort of situation. So we go there when we do. This is a YAML situation. So if you look about this, the definition has three very specific parts here. A couple of properties, a couple of parameters, and the policy definition itself. That's a policy rule. These here are just the identifiers. What do you want? Is it a built-in policy or a custom policy? Most of those policies would be built-in, because as I started, there are like hundreds and hundreds of policies pushed every day for every resource by Microsoft and other contributors. You do not need to create a custom policy. It's so much there that you could always pick up one and copy and duplicate and create your own initiative with that. You could go to an initiative, pick a policy, duplicate it, and add it to your own initiative and make a custom bundle for yourself without having to write a policy ever. Yeah. The policy type is built in. That's the reason, because we've not created it. This is given by Microsoft. Description, metadata for versioning, very important. If you're because we are in governance user group, this is very important to identify and making sure that we're using the right version of policies. Yeah. And the parameters here are defined. They are just variables. Basically, variables that will be used in the policy rule itself. So in case it's one of those season thing where you, in spite of you having to write one word, you define a parameter for it, because it's much easier to change things at one location rather than changing at every location. That's one of the reasons why parameters are allowed. The best part here is that each of these policies, you do not have to guess what kind of effect does it have. You do not have to guess, because the effect is mentioned here. And all these effects that are mentioned here are applicable, and they kind of are always similar. For example, audit basically means the policy would notice if something is different, and it would just record it. It won't do anything, it would just record it. Deny basically is what I explained before. It just kills it right there with a message, an optional message, of course, if you have given it one. Disable means the policy is not working. It's just going ahead and just sitting there. It's not working. It's not noting. It's not interfering with anything. Depending on what your situation is, and if it's test and dev, maybe it could be just audit. If it's production, it definitely has to be denied or modify, whichever is your poison to remediate that. Yeah. Now, if you see here, it's basically just if and else, the policy statement, and this is a very clear structure in here. It goes ahead and starts with an if statement. It says if all of this and all of this. Basically says if you find a field that says keyword. If you find recovery create mode in that field, that says recover. And if you go ahead and see public access disabled, any of means in this could be this value or it could be both of these value. Some of these are defined a little bit different than the others. The one I am going to demonstrate has a very simple condition, one-off condition. So we could work on that. But right now, if you see, they're checking a lot of other things also. So it starts with all of. That means every one of those conditions has to match except here. This says either this one or this one has to match. So if it does, then it goes ahead and records it. That's the then effect, which was defined as a default value of audit. And that is just it, 3 sections. Those 3 sections are basically what are defined. And it's not more than if then else statement, but it depends on what is the condition there. Okay? If you could go ahead and if you want to create yourself, you have to make sure that the condition that you are looking for is identified. We talk about that in a second. Now, what you could do is you could either assign the policy directly. This is a built-in policy. I would personally not do it because I would not try to corrupt built-in policy. I would copy it and bundle it in an initiative and then try and deploy it. So you can assign a policy directly from here. So if we do this, we end up in a situation where it's asking, where do you want to assign it? That could be management level, subscription, resource level. Where do you want this rule to be applicable? I could not select a resource group and just leave it as subscription. That goes there. If you want any resource that should not be affected by it, and that is where exceptions come in. That is exactly where these things have to be done before you establish environments and locations and without tags that are needed for governance. Then all of those exist in exclusions, and that's a very bad situation because then you have a priority situation and you have to keep track of it. That's exactly what you're trying to avoid. Yeah. Policy definition, you could go ahead and search and change the policy if you want, but we already have it selected, so that's okay. Assignment name is basically we are going to assign it to the subscription and what identifier name. That is just it. Policy enforce is basically enable, disable the choice that was there. But this is something. If you do it, you end up with a lot of assignments. And you do not want that. Because if you look at this, all of these are definitions, loads and loads of it. The scroll bar just keeps going on, and you can import more definitions from GitHub. Microsoft has a GitHub repository where you could see all of these definitions in action. I think I had them somewhere here. Okay. There's this GitHub from Microsoft about starter templates. If you go there, you have a lot of policies that you could just borrow from them. And you don't actually have to import them because a lot of them are here right now in front of you. For example, this foundational benchmark, CIS, cloud security, it's already imported and you could assign this to your subscriptions, to your management group, and a lot of good stuff that quite frankly, most of the administrators also do not think about because they might not have seen that situation in their enterprise, are already present there. So the guesswork kind of goes out of the window. And if you see here, there are 2 types of things here. There are built-in policies and then there are initiatives. Yeah. So we'll look at the initiative here. All of these initiatives that are here, for example, public access, this initiative is a collection of policies specifically devised to make sure that the policies could impact resources that have public access or might have public access. And these are all bundled into one big named package. That is what initiative is basically, a bundle, a cluster of policies. Right? Next, if you think about it, there could be individual policies, yes. There could be initiatives, yes. You could give them categories about what they have to do and what are they impacting. That's all good. The next thing that comes into picture is the assignment. You want to also keep track of what is assigned to which subscription. All of those come here. So that's one of the reasons why I emphasize so much that do not assign policies, assign initiatives, because the same situation that happens under definition, that you keep scrolling and you have to search for things, would end up happening in the assignments also. Right now, I just have one because I've assigned one initiative to my subscription. And that makes total sense because all the policies that are there are just bundled in the initiatives. All those remediation messages, everything is under one initiative. And that's all I need. I do not want to scroll down. It makes things easier. Exceptions is what you want to keep empty. You do not want people to have exceptions to your policies. You do not want you to create exceptions. Every policy that we've seen, every policy can have an exception. For example, let's pick a random one, public access, and pick policy. Assignment, sorry. Yeah, so you could create an exception for your particular assignment. If you've assigned to a subscription, you could go ahead and create an exception and try not to give a permanent exception. If an exception is a time-bound exception, that means people are working to remediate it. If an exception is not time-bound, that means it's just an exception. It's one of those things that was never achieved and will probably never be achieved. That's kind of the reason why it should always have an exception time. Scope is again the same thing. Where do you want the exception to be? And the assignment name, there is a friendly name for the exception. Why do you want to do it? Because, well, I think I have mitigated it in a way that that policy cannot detect. That's the reason. For example, a couple of people, a couple of developers, when they develop a web apps, they kind of have a situation where they verify the user's identity through code. So certificate exchange is not needed. In that case, any policy that's verifying incoming traffic can be waived because it's mitigated. And waived is basically that I accept the risk, which, trust me, nobody understands, because the impact that one particular security breach can have on the company needs to be properly measured to be waived. But most of the times, teams end up waiving without understanding the complete risk. It's kind of a situation where we overestimate or underestimate the risk that kind of would happen if something like this is exposed. The policies that you want to accept, if you do not want to go ahead and give an exception on whole initiative, choose one of them that you want. And that's how you create an exception. Try not to create one because that gets very messy very soon. Yeah, cool. Okay. Let's talk something about, I wanted to show how we could go ahead and do this on Portal and on as a code. And that's kind of why this guy was here, because demos rarely go as planned. Yeah, well, I hope it does. For starters, just so that I at least have one successful demo in case something happens, I've created a custom initiative and a custom policy. So let me filter it out, X, Y, Z. Yeah. If you see this one, it's basically a built-in policy that was just copied. So there was something called allowed location. This one here. This is a property or a policy is given by Azure in its initiatives. And I just went ahead and duplicated the policy. So just copied it. The reason why I did not want to work with this is because these are mostly uneditable. So if I want to change the consequence, which I did actually, I went ahead and duplicated it and changed the consequence to just audit. And that was one of the changes that you could do. And then you could assign it to the initiative. So the thing that I did here was ended up looking something like this here. So the effect now is just audit. It's not deny, it's just audit. Right? So when I do this, I go ahead and create my own version of things. So I could give my own version of things. I could give my own version of the list that goes through for the parameters. So I've asked it to just note it down. That's all that I've done. So I could edit, I could delete, all of that. Good stuff. Yeah. Basically, this is how it looks like. I could create my own category. I could import policy definitions from GitHub. GitHub is here. So that's Azure Policies GitHub samples. So you could have all the policies that are available, built-in reference or built-in policies, sorry. Yeah. So policy definitions, all of these are individual policies. What you have here, policy set definition, are initiatives that have policy as a bundle. Yeah. You could import it from there, or you could just copy and paste from something that we had, so duplicate it. In that case, you just need a name, that's all. And you could change the parameter that, like I did for the audit. And similarly, you could create initiative from here. Yeah. And give a scope, give a new category. Category is the last section that appears there. Add policies that you want. So we could add policy definitions here. Hypothetically, I could just select the policy from here as soon as it loads. Yes, I could just select one custom policy and add it. That would just end up here. You could add more policies. You could add initiatives, I think, too, right? If you want to group them. Now, this is something that you have to understand. An initiative doesn't mean a big bundle of things. It could be a big bundle of small things. A group is a subcategory, like under management group, there is a subscription level and a resource group level, and then resources. So everything is a collection of resources, but resources are bundled into resource groups, and resource groups are bundled into subscriptions. That's kind of a thing here. So you can create a group, and that group could be mapped to policies. All the policies that are similar could be in one group. More than one group could end up in an initiative. If your initiative has a parameter that's common, then you give an initiative parameter. Otherwise, you give policy parameters like we are going to do. So the locations basically just is similar to what we've done before. So we select a couple of locations that are allowed, and except that, nothing would be allowed. We've defined an initiative. Now we have an initiative, but this still doesn't work. Why? Because we do not have an assignment. We do not have an assignment, and that's the reason why we go ahead and click on this. And if we have any exclusions, no, we don't. We just give it an assignment name, XYZ. Then any parameters, remediations, the most important part is you give a message that gives meaning to what your implementation is. It might not have been very important, but because this is a compliance meet, governance meet, this is important. Yeah. So it's very important to say here that you have to have a message that doesn't confuse users and gives them directly what they are missing there. Yeah. You do that and you end up with a policy assignment there. This is good for explanation and stuff, but this is not fun exactly. I personally prefer doing it with code. So Let me take you to the GitHub repository where I've created a sample for you. Yeah. Okay, how do I get rid of you, my friend? Okay. I have to set some proper information before I move to that. We were just looking at the policy section. All you have to do is just search for policies up here, and this is what you are looking at, and that's the overview. So if you have resources that are compliant, non-compliant, the graph here sort of gives you what exactly happens here. You can set up some remediation steps also about what do you want to do with those non-compliant resources. This is very important. This is the management report that you usually would want to see and pin it. Now the question arises, if I want to go ahead and create my own policy, right? How do I go ahead and check what kind of property do I have to work with? It usually starts with looking at the template. You could either do a deployment and then export a template, or just deploy the resource and look at the template. Right now, the template that I'm looking for is for a storage account. A storage account has export template at the end. I go ahead and check this out, and I see that there is this property that's always false, and I want it to be true. This is my choice, and I understand this now, right? I could also do it through this resource, that is the resources.azure.com. It's a website that gives you the template, the background templates, the ARM templates for your particular resource. So you could just beep, 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 boop, and check out your resource, and there you are. Yeah. If you want to deploy it, then that's at the end of it, you get the export template part of it. Either way, the point is, I get to a point where I know the property that I want to focus on for a storage account. So this is something that you have to understand. For a storage account, I know that I have to work on this property. And if this thing allows me to move around, just a second. Yeah. Right. So now we have this. The next thing I do is I have to find the corresponding policy alias for that particular resource, and I have to find out where that policy is being implemented. Yeah. So I'm going to run a command that is going to go ahead and give me a list of aliases for policies that are there. And I've given that as a link also. It's just the same command. All you have to change is the namespace about what resource are you working with. This one gives you all the aliases. So you end up getting something like this, which is a big list. But then you search for what you were looking for in the policy, and it usually is generally something like this. This is the property I was looking for, and this whole thing is the alias for policy. Now we have an alias, and this is the property we want to follow and focus on. And this is where my favorite part comes into picture, the code part of the things. Yeah. This is the repository that I created for Bicep, and this is how I categorize my resources, and there's a section for policies here. What I've done is I've gone ahead and taken inspiration from this detailed policy definition structure for Azure Bicep. If you just give me 1 second, would you? I think somebody's at the door. Just give me 1 second. So I just go back to policy documentation, and I look at a basic structure of how do they define a policy. I just copy one of those, right? And that's kind of policy definition. But in Bicep, that's a little bit different. If you want to define these things with Bicep, turns out that you have to have a proper structure around it. And that structure is given by Bicep definition, which I think I might have closed. Bicep Azure Policy. This is the Bicep definition, and this exactly gives you the definition of how you define a policy in Bicep. It has a very good example here that could give you more details around it. We're going to focus on what basic structure that I have devised here. So what I've done is I've defined a couple of where did that go? See one, yeah. So I've given it a scope. I've just defined a scope. Now the scope of a policy could be, as we discussed before, a management group, a subscription, or something else, a resource group too, yeah, or just a resource too. That could be possible. I've given a policy name variable, and this is nothing special. What is special though is I have a Bicep resource tag that has a template structure from Microsoft, given it a name, and that template structure comes in from the definition part of it, the one that I showed you here. This is the structure. This is the structure that I've copied from, and you could actually, you have to expand more because all the properties are listed there. Because I am making this policy, this is now custom. What I'm trying to give it a display name and a description, that's very human, because then you identify things. The mode is that it will be deploying on all the resources and full on execution. Parameters is a section where we could have given parameters, but I usually prefer to keep it up above with variables and global parameters. So I'm not going to define anything here. This here is the crust of the matter. Can you all see the screen, or should I zoom in? I feel like I should zoom in. Please do say something if it's not clear. Yeah. Yeah. So the policy definition here, policy rule, it kind of says that for all of, if for everything here, and everything is basically a storage account and then the traffic here. This property is especially from this alias here. So this is what I'm using here, the whole thing, and is true. And it kind of says it's not equal to true. Essentially, it could have been false too. But if it's not equals to true or equals to false, basically means the same thing, then we go ahead and deny stuff. Absolutely just deny stuff. Now this here is just the definition. Very simple, very straightforward. That's the definition. Yeah. In case it does that, and now we have a definition. So what we do is we go ahead and now create an initiative. The reason why I'm creating an initiative, in case I want to add policies, more policies, I do not have to repeat the assignments again, because the assignment would be on initiative. I could just keep adding policies here and there. Initiative is also basically similar Bicep thing. So a Bicep resource tag, a name for resource identifier, the library reference, and a couple of parameters. I have a name for the initiative, HTTPS initiative, give it a couple of properties, and this here again is from the documentation from policy set. When you go to policy set, you see the initiative has a sort of structure, and that's what I've copied here. I go ahead and give it a description, some tags, because we're doing governance. It's very important to properly tag things so we could go ahead and generate reports afterwards. Yeah. And then we go ahead and define some parameters. And then we finally add a property for the policy. The policy here is basically just telling you that whatever I've defined above, I take it and I give it a name. And the policy ID is here. I give it a reference identifier so that in case I meet it out in the open, I can identify it. The policy type is, of course, custom because we are defining it. This cannot be built in. This would be result in an exception error if in case we define it as built in. Key thing to note here is that this here is just one policy defined. And this bracket here defines in bicep an array of things. So that basically means we can have a number of these, and hence initiative. This is the policy set, which is basically called an initiative. So this set here is defined. You could actually go on much more detail, but I've just created a basic set. The next resource that I'm creating with bicep is a resource that is going to be an assignment, the policy set assignment. Yeah. Now the policy set assignment here goes ahead and creates with this library. Again, going here into the documentation, and you would see that it's the first one. Just copy the skeleton from there and paste properties. The one thing that I've tried to do is give a proper message. A proper message is very important because then I understand what went wrong when I was trying to deploy this and something happened. The policy reference ID, this here is initiative because I really want to go ahead and do it all together. And that's why one assignment for one initiative, and that's all done. The output part is basically bicep. So this is a small bicep file that will eventually make sure that HTTPS is enabled for all the resources that are storage account. So the secure transfer. This is being deployed by this YAML file, which is a standard pipeline file. A couple of variables defined. Bicep template is being linted, and then there is a deployment, which is a standard deployment task, nothing special. I do not have parameter file there because I've not defined any parameters there. Pretty simple, straightforward. I've introduced it into a pipeline, and it basically is just this. You have to, if you end up in this situation, all you have to do, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this, but all you have to do is new pipeline from GitHub repo or Azure DevOps repo, which this is. You go ahead and create an existing template, and then you select one of those templates from here. Since I've done it, this is how it would look like at the end of the day when this is being done. This is what you have, the deployment file. I go ahead and run it. But before that, let's try something. Yeah. Let's see if the policies and initiatives are there. There are assignments. Yes. It should be like. So we delete the assignments. Okay, cool. They are not there. That's cool. Yeah, that means there are no assignments. That means even if there are policies there, they're not enforced. Try to create a storage account. Default today's date, 74. I could deploy it anywhere right now. Remember, I've deleted all the assignments for location also. We'll get to that eventually. Okay, advanced. This is the HTTPS situation. So if we remove this small thing that happened there, ideally it should pass validation. It should go ahead and pass validation and should say that, yeah, things look fine. You could go ahead and you could deploy it. That's okay. If we look at the template, parameter, this is false. And that's okay with policy because the policies are still not there. We go ahead and run policies and deploy this. The benefit of keeping it in DevOps is that whenever your team creates resources, they could actually have a check for gate that is passed from one stage to another to check if they are aligned with the policies. So everything is in code and everything is being aligned. And quite frankly, it looks very beautiful too. When we do this, eventually we should end up with a policy and an initiative. And the next time we try storage account, it should not work. And we're done. Good. Now there should be an assignment here. Anytime now. I see. Yeah, I think that is on those. Display name Repositories initiative. Demo goes strike again. Yeah, that's the one. So we have a policy, an initiative, sorry, and a policy. Yeah, and we should have an assignment too. Yes, so HTTPS lock. Let's go ahead and deploy the storage account again. Now we go ahead and do the same things. We're going to uncheck this and review. This ideally should go ahead and create a policy problem for us. And when we click on it, we should have, yeah, there it is. When we look at it, that's the reason, a random information message, but you get the point. You have an information there. If this was not there, a reason was not there, this creates confusion, and which leads to frustration, which leads to not being adopted. Infrastructure as code is only adopted because it's convenient and repeatable and it's easy eventually. So the first investment of effort kind of comes through. That's the reason. Let me show you another example there. So I have another example that goes ahead and restricts location. Now, if you might have noticed, we did not have anything for locations and locations for going through, right? This policy here, what it does is it takes subscription scope and it deploys to subscription. In this one here, the policy, everything else is same. The policy definition, policy assignment, and policy initiative definition. Everything is the same. What changes here is the condition. It says if not in allowed location. So the location property or the field is not here. Now, notice it is not associated to a storage account or a virtual machine. It's just a field. That means it's applicable to every kind of resource, right? Even if it's assigned to subscription, it's not limited to a resource. That's one of those things that you could do. Now, if we go ahead and check out the policy deployment, it's basically the same. I'm taking a resource group task, resource manager task, deploying the files all together. When you go ahead and run the pipeline for that, we will end up with one more policy and one more assignment for location when this is being done. It's just one task for resource manager, so this should be easy, very fast too. By the way, there's a PowerShell command also for doing the same thing. I'm going to pass a link to that. It's just one command, so not much of a biggie. Cool. This is done. So ideally, there should be a policy here and an assignment too, a new one. Yeah, location initiative, and that's what this is. So there's a location restriction now on the same things. We go to the assignment. There should be an yeah, location lock initiative. These are two because I've assigned policy also, and I've assigned an initiative also. That's to give you an opinion that yes, both of those could be done with an assignment. And yeah, this should go ahead and work on it. I do not have a remediation message, so that is different again. So I will not get a remediation message, but I have a couple of things that couple of locations that are only allowed. So now if I try India, this would not work. Yeah, just gonna refresh it just so that it doesn't work with cache. Cache. Yeah. Okay. Let's review this. Yeah. So location lock, disallowed by policy. There you have it. That's the end of the demo, and demo is kind of worked out. So I'm happy for that. Any questions that you have? Yasin, Jakub, any questions that you have around this? Anything that I should say more?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I lost my I lost my AirPods from disconnected. Well, this isn't where I've stumbled upon this from the user side. I'm not working too much with this. I'm familiar with the concepts and how it's working. We did work quite a bit with it, and I worked at HealthVest, so we used this for tailoring the Azure environment for the research department. So the ideas behind it and the setup is really, really nice, and it's a must-have for most customers, even though most customers probably haven't got anything. So, but from the technical side, most of it was not Greekish, but a bit far from what I do on a day-to-day basis. But it's nice to see how it's working, because I tend to get blocked by it from time to time with different customers.
Yeah, I know. It's people like me who might have set it up without explanation.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. I didn't quite catch.
I was just saying that it's people like me who set it up, sometimes without explanation.
Yeah,
so.
Probably. Yeah. and also we have some like the demo where something not was working with. We get these. Well, this should be working, but you are not. I cannot deploy this script or this application because the key vault isn't configured. But it shouldn't work like this. So. But that's the way Azure works. It works in mysterious ways from time to time.
Yeah, it does. It does work in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
Just when you least expect it. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does.
Cool. I hope you liked it though, right. And can I request you something? I have to take a screenshot for the YouTube video that would be uploaded. Is it possible that you could open your webcam so I could maybe take a picture, of the whole thing?
Of the participants?
Yeah, for the YouTube video there has to be a
Yeah.
title, So when the video would be posted, I was wondering if you could take a picture of who was there and a screenshot of the
sure.
Teams window. Yeah.
Like this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So just 3, 2, and smile. Yeah. Oh, I could take it again. You have this. Yeah. There you go. 3, 2, 1. There you go. We have it now.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks again. I will post the video and yeah, I think I have all the information here on Meetup. So yeah.
I support the initiative. Do you always go for the 4:30 time slot, or do we have other time slots later on, perhaps? Or
it's an off-hour situation, but in case there's a request, we could probably bump it up to 1 o'clock. I don't know. I'm still wondering about how to do this.
But for my part, sometimes this I did sign up for the last meetup as well, but I didn't attend because it tends to be in the middle of all the logistics and after work, dinner, football practice, and etc. etc. So sometimes it works better from later in the evening, but we'll probably make 4:30 work as well if that is what suits most of the people. So just on a thought from my side.
It's a new thing that I'm doing,
Yeah.
and I'm still open to suggestions. In case people feel like it should be under, 1 o'clock. I don't know. I have. This is my first time doing this, so yeah, I'm open to suggestions. My partner, who hasn't been able to join, actually, he actually recommended that we do this at the evening, or so that was kind of it. But again, if in case that doesn't work out, we could always try a new time slot. I think I'll open a poll for that.
Yeah,
that seems like a good thing to do.
We probably do. And of course, I'd like to contribute in some way, but I'm afraid that the next meetup, May 14th, is not a good time. We're having a party on the Sunday the 12th, so I think my schedule is fairly booked beforehand. But maybe the next one. I'm not sure if you're doing one in June as well.
I think June would be there, but I don't think I'll do it in July because there's a holidays there. Yeah.
July we'll skip July. Well, okay, then I'll look into the I'll kind of follow the LinkedIn side, and I'll create some sort of suggestion for a session or something, and we'll see what it leads to.
Yeah. Do you have a LinkedIn? I could maybe send you a request. We could connect on LinkedIn. That's the whole point of me organizing this.
Yeah, okay. I just followed on your page, but you can find me on Jakob Tigernes. You just look for my name and you'll find me, or I can look you up later on.
No worries. I think I have your name and I'm going to search for it. But yeah, that's the end of the day. I am not going to stop any of you again. And well, thank you so much for being here. This was a lovely experience. Hope to see you again next time.
Yeah. Nice to meet you. And as I said, love the initiative. So we'll speak to you later on.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Have a good one.
Okay.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.